Good evening. Welcome to the Budget Information Meeting. Just a little administrative work ahead of time. For those joining us online, please raise your hand when you have a question. Rainey's going to keep track of you, and we will call on you when you raise your hand. So, welcome. Lamoille North vision for our students is equity, access, and opportunity through academic rigor, social, emotional, health and wellness, and student engagement. And I'm going to run through these slides fast, so slow me down, back me up. I'm yours for the evening. These budgets support pre-K through 12 curriculum alignment, staff professional development, strong instructional leadership, consistency in assessment of student progress and assessment of needs for instructional modification, well-defined student support systems, flexible pathways to learning, mentoring for students in life, career, and interest, counseling, coaching, interventionist services, universal nutrition services, restorative practices in all schools, beginning with a foundation of belonging and safety, community partnerships, advanced placement opportunities and project learning opportunities, project-based learning opportunities, strengthening of the home to school communications, opportunities for student leadership, increased athletic offerings and more extracurricular offerings, education in trades to support student interests and career possibilities. The key considerations in producing these budgets is that administrators developed their 26 budgets based on the needs in their schools and new class size requirements coming down from the state. Budget drafts, economic factors, and new legislation was shared and reviewed by the Board Finance Committee throughout the development process. And this year we started earlier because we felt we had a lot of work to do in light of the challenges last year. The board met with stakeholders and listened to community inputs and concerns. And these budgets effectively absorb general economic pressures that are driving costs upward, support a move to competitive wages in our area, continue to apply at least 3/4 of all resources to instruction and direct student services and supports, as well as supporting a reduction to the district tax rate of more than 11% and reductions of up to 9.5% in the post-common level of appraisal town tax rates. We've included in the slides the organizational charts for the supervisory union as a whole, the supervisory union offices, the organizational chart for the secondary schools, and the organizational charts for the elementary schools. These charts are updated every fall with new employee FTE counts and student full-time equivalent counts. So finally, key factors in building the FY26 budget is that the state was forecasting a 6.1% increase in education spending statewide. The modified unified school districts combined increase is 1.4%. The state was forecasting a 7% increase in per student spending statewide. The modified unified's combined change is relatively flat at a 0.09% increase. The state was forecasting a $1.75 base homestead tax rate before common level of appraisal. The modified unified's estimated base homestead tax rate is $1.55. This fall, the modified unified gained just about 30 students, or 1.1% in our student weighted count. And as of June 24, there was $1,050,000 in unassigned fund balances available. Of that, $795,000 has been applied to the 26 budget to help hold rates down. We threw in the Lamoille North Supervisory Union in the information meeting, Basically, at the supervisory union itself, we're holding relatively flat at less than a 1% decrease, or a decrease of about 107,800. 107,800. But a key of note in the supervisory union is that just about 85% of the SU budget is instruction, special education, and transportation for students. So still, even at the supervisory union, it's supporting students directly. Again, we have pie charts for those who prefer pie charts. It's the same percentages on the previous page. Almost 85% goes directly to students and student supports. At the modified unified elementary level, we're looking at a 3.4% increase overall in expenditures. For revenues, we're looking at about a 21% increase overall, primarily due to use of the prior year surplus, where we have small decreases in general fund revenues and grant fund revenues. In the modified unified elementary schools, based on department, the increase of 3.4, we're still seeing over 75% of our budget covering students, and when you add in the transportation and school nutrition, you're looking at almost 80, let me get to the page, 78%. Now, there's a correction in the annual meeting book. If you have the annual meeting book and you're reading it, this grant-funded programs number says 842. That is an internal notation only. It does not affect that bottom line calculation of a 3.4% increase. Again, this is another way of looking at it. When you throw in your transportation and your student nutrition services, about 88% of the resources are going directly to instruction, student supports, and student services. Only 4% of the budget is actually the SU administrative support services for the entire supervisory union. We had questions at the annual meeting about seeing the budget based on the type of expense versus the department or the function of the expense. So we're looking at salaries, employee benefits, the assessment. It looks a little different, but when we go here, we see that over 63% of the budget, there's probably a pointer here, but I can't, I'll mess things up. Over 63% of the budget is personnel costs alone. Second is increases in technology, and those are software licensure and devices, purchase of new devices, primarily for students or when our computers get old and stop working and stop connecting to the internet, which is me. Blake got me a nice computer that I'm learning how to use. And then finally, tuition. Pre-K tuition at Hyde Park and Johnson has been sort of buried in other line items. We broke it out and threw it into its own tuition line now. Those are your big drivers. And then the corresponding pie chart for those who prefer to look at these on pie chart. This slideshow can be produced for anybody, and for those online, I'm happy to send them to you if you'd like. Are there any questions so far at the elementary level budgets? Oh.
Hi, yes, I do have a question. If you can go back one slide, one from the pie chart. Okay, so it says other purchased services. Do you, because it's just a significant amount of money there. Looks like 672,000. What are those other purchase services? Like, what do they include?
So those are some facilities type items. Their transportation is in there, which is a big one. There are any of the purchase services that are not considered the professional services, which would be tuition type items.
HVAC contracts. Do you want me to go into detail about?
Sure.
Yeah, I can, just a quick one.
Facilities expenses usually are considered like HVAC contracts that we carry at each site. That's also going to be like our fire alarm inspections, sprinkler inspections. There's all kinds of annual inspections that we need to do, and those are all titled under those other purchase services.
And quite a few of the IT support ones are under that other purchase services, the internet stuff, the communications.
Okay.
So at the modified unified middle and high school expenses, we're looking at a 1.5% increase in overall expenditures. At the revenues, again, about a 21%. Now, at the secondary level, we're seeing an increase in interest income. We expect to see more interest. We've done very well in the last 2 years with interest income. State categorical aid, which hasn't been there before in the past, in particular ELL, and then again the application of prior year surpluses. At the middle and high school, the primary expenditures, when you're looking at instruction services, at 78.5%, and then you start to roll in your transportation and school nutrition programs, you're looking at almost 82% of the resources going directly to instruction, student services, and student supports. From a type of expenditure versus a purpose of expenditure or department level, again, personnel at the secondary levels, 56% of the budget when you combine the salaries and benefits. Special education looks like it's jumping a big time. This is just a phenomenon of the way we divide it up based on the October 1 enrollment numbers. But you can see offsetting here is that professional purchase services. The special education, Jen has done a phenomenal job of reworking the way the services will be delivered to bring that delivery of services back in-house, which is going to save money. We've been contracting out and sending the kids out. We're going to bring as many as we can back in, deliver those services in-house. That gives a more hands-on, direct approach to making sure they're getting the services they need. And then tuition, primarily at the vocation level, at the middle, well, at the high school, the state has reassessed the amount that they are paying out directly to vocation for the kids that are attending the tech centers, and it's less. The rate went down. So districts are bearing a bigger brunt of that directly. So that's kind of it for the two budgets, the elementary and the secondary. Are there questions on those before we get into the tax calculation? All right. So we were talking about the tax calculation a little bit before we got started, but these budgets right now show an estimated decrease before the common level of appraisal of about 19.5 cents, which is $195 for a $100,000 home, or $293 for a $150,000 home. If statewide budgets come in with lower spending than the 6.1% anticipated in the December 1 tax commissioner's letter, the yield could be adjusted upward, which further decreases those tax rates. Lamoille North, modified unified, gained about almost 30 students, 29 and a half, over the same time last year, or about 1%. So while the conservative budgeting, the slight increase in students, and the increase to the yield that's already been produced this year have reduced the impact on districts or the base tax rate, persistent growth in property values continues to drive that final town tax rate up. The state in FY27 has introduced a new element to the education tax rate calculation called the statewide adjustment. This adjustment is basically the average common level of appraisal divided into each town's common level of appraisal. So the actuaries, or the man behind the curtain, goes through and they determine a town's common level of appraisal. The common level of appraisal, I know most of the people sitting here have heard this before. The common level of appraisal will take a town's appraised values, grand list value, and turn it into a market value. So if the grand list is exactly at market value, the common level of appraisal is 100%. If the grand list is below market value, the common level of appraisal is that much below 100%. If the grand list is above market value, the common level of appraisal is that much above the grand list, is that same amount above. I forgot where I was going with that, but that's what the common level of appraisal is. So now for FY26, they've determined the common level of appraisal as they always have determined the common level of appraisal. But they've said, let's take the average and divide every town's common level of appraisal by the average common level of appraisal. And what the intention of that is to soften or decrease the impact or the focus of those increases and decreases in tax rates away from the volatility of the shifting property values. The market has been so volatile and just gone through the roof. Some common levels of appraisal are at 50%, which just becomes a meaningless number after a while. So they've used this statewide adjustment. It has no impact on the final tax rate because you're going to multiply the yield up above by that statewide adjustment factor, and you're going to divide common levels of appraisal below. So in order to compare the current year's tax calculation with 26's tax calculation, we had to come up with the statewide adjustment for 25 as if the law had been in place for this year. That was provided by the AOE to us last fall. And that rate is 76.6%, whereas the current year's statewide adjustment is 72.36. So even here you can start to see, I'll go back to the other slide in a second. Even here you can start to see that as property values, market values continue to rise, it's pushing that statewide adjustment down as well. So last year it was 76.6 was the average common level of appraisal. For FY26, the average common level of appraisal is down to 72.36. Have I totally confused everybody?
Common level of appraisal was raised, so it's a divisor.
So it's a multiplier up high. It's a multiplier here at the yield. So last year's published yield was about $9,900. When we multiply it by, or this year's yield was $9,900. When we multiply it by the 76.6, we get to 75, 78. This year, they did the math for us. They didn't show us what it would have been. They just said, that's the new yield. So you can see, apples to apples, the yield went up $1,000. Straight off. Bringing us down to the district change of 19.5 cents. So the district rate actually went down 19.5 cents. So FY25's district rate is 1.7439. FY26 district rate is estimated at 1.5485. So right off the bat, before there's any adjustments to the yield, that was the yield that was announced on December 1. And we've already heard from the governor that if district spending stays under a percentage of increase that was expected, he's willing to buy that rate down further. By changing the yield, they'd push the yield up, which would bring that rate down. Do you want me to go back to the calculation page?
No, I want you to explain how the tax rate goes up and you're saying it's going down.
What tax rate's going up? So this is after the common level of appraisal. Yep, sorry. This is pre-common level of appraisal, gets to the district rate. And then we go in and we divide by the common level of appraisal.
Okay, so 25 was higher than 26 will be.
Correct.
We're going to save some money, maybe.
Yeah. All indications are there. And from the early rhetoric that was coming out, this confused everybody. Because we all got together and we went, are your rates going down? Yeah. Are yours? Yeah. So what were they talking about? So, and it has to do with that yield. You know, they went and they did all their property valuation. They went and they did. So we're asked in October, where do you think your increase is going to come in? Just a big, broad swipe. And they use it when they determine that yield. So we're looking at anywhere from $55 savings in Eden, possibly for a $100,000 home, to a potential $172 savings at Johnson for $100,000. I know, right? Can't wait to see mine. Are there any questions at this point?
I have a question. Thank you for answering that first one. Can you, and I might have just missed it, can you explain how the yield is determined again? Who determines that? How they get that number?
So I'm not an expert on the yield itself, but they ask districts, generally through the district, the business manager, but they ask districts, what do you anticipate your spending increase will be? They already know what our spending is for 25, our budget spending. They say, what do you think it'll be? We all answer. So that gives them an idea of the spending for the coming year. And then they look at the property values and the common levels of appraisal, and they determine, and they look at all the other revenue that's provided at the state level. Lottery funds, Rainey, you remember them all off the top of your head, rooms and meals, I mean, all those other revenues. And they say, this is the spending, this is all the revenues we have other than property tax, this is what we have to raise for property tax. To get there, based on the number of students we have, based on the spending that's being forecast, we need a yield of $8,553.
I understand. Thank you for that.
Yeah, sorry. Sometimes I get a little long-winded.
No, it was thorough. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So we're going to move on to GMTCC. The mission of GMTCC is to promote the mastery of the essential academic skills, technical skills, and employability skills for secondary and adult students to succeed in the workplace and to continue professional education and professional learning. The 26 budget notables for GMTCC is the primary drivers behind a 5.5% increase are staff salaries as outlined in our master agreements, and another double-digit increase to health benefits. The increases in the program expenses outside of personnel are reflective of current inflation rates for goods and services. The budget includes supply costs for the engineering program operating in FY26. This will be the third year of the engineering program. It's the first year? Okay.
Next year will be year 2.
So then it's, okay, yeah, sorry. This year is the first year. FY26 is the second year. It's a 3-year grant, and it's covering the cost of the instructor, the salaries and benefits. So in FY27, that budget year will see the budget needing to absorb the cost, the general funds absorb the cost for the engineering instructor. Additionally, this FY26 budget includes $88,000 of the prior year's reserved surplus applied to reduce tuition increases or hold down the increases. In essence, the budgeted expenses for FY26 are $4.2 million, expected revenues of $2.4 million, leaving $1.8 million of tuition to be raised from the sending districts, divided by the 6th semester average, and we'll get into the 6th semester average in a second, giving a per pupil tuition for the sending districts of about $14,000. That's up about $1,700. Now the 6th semester average, you can see in 24 we had 130. For the current year, 128.7. We're starting to climb back up again, 128.8. The difficulty with the 6th semester average, and it shows a lot this year and in creating the budget for 26, is this fall we had almost a 30 student enrollment gain. But we don't get to realize revenue for those 30 students all at one time. That semester's enrollment has to wait until it moves further up in the 6th semester average. So fall of 24 at 157, spring of 25 at whatever we're at today, around 157, will move up in the average, and this 128.8 will slowly climb. But the cost to operate at the 157 needs to happen immediately. So it takes a while to get the offsetting state revenues to accommodate it. So there's a little bit of a lag. Are there any questions at this point yet? This slide I like it because it just shows a long-term running tally of the changes. But as our programs become more relative, become more popular, the cost of operating goes up, and that 6th semester average really messes with trying to control that sending district tuition.
Where does the sending district get the money?
So it comes out of their general fund. So the tuition line in our high school amount, it comes from our state funds that come down. But the state also will take some of our ed spending and send it directly to the tech center on behalf of the high school. It's all ed spending. It just sort of comes from a different slice of the pie. And it's a lot easier to let the state cut the check than to get the invoice and mail a check. It's a very psychological thing, but.
I understand. But the tech center is part of the modified, unified, solidified school district.
Correct.
So how can we be sending to ourselves?
So because tech centers are a unique type of entity in education in Vermont, they operate differently. Their revenue outside of grants, Perkins grants and a couple of other grants, is 100% tuition driven, even though that tuition is education spending. So it does not directly impact the tax rate. However, increases in tuition will impact our tax rate. It's a little convoluted. I understand it, but I don't know if I can articulate quite as well as I do understand it. Tech centers don't get a check from the town clerk. They don't get a check cut from the treasury, right? That's directly out of ed spending. They get a portion, so they take all the ed spending for the state and they pull a portion of it out and they say this is for tech centers based on the number of kids across the state going to tech centers. And then the rest of it has to come directly from the district themselves. It's an indirect payment of education spending. And this is where I'd say, I am happy to sit down with you with the budget and we can watch the bouncing ball and the cash flow statement. So every town clerk gets a cash flow statement. It's sometimes confusing, and if I'm up on a soapbox, everyone can tell me to just stop. So these are state budgets. These are state funds. But the cash doesn't go to Montpelier and then come back to your town. Your town clerk collects your local tax, right? What's collected locally. And then the state says, well, the state now owes you the rest of that budget and cuts a check to the district, and the town clerk cuts a check for the amount that he or she has collected. And it gets confusing because the town clerk is still involved in there. It feels like this is local. It's all local, but it's not. It's just a portion of the state. And that gets back to your comment about, failing a budget vote and making changes at the local level has very little impact on your local tax rate because that tax rate is determined based on statewide spending. The calculation looks local, but that yield is based on statewide spending, and that's what's driving.
To summarize that, the state's going to collect the money,
Correct.
regardless of whether we approve the budget or not.
Correct.
And maybe we get that amount, we get the amount of the approved budget, even though the state's already collected. So last time we went through 3 budgets.
Yep.
And we finally came up with a budget.
Right.
And that's what the state paid us, even though they collected based on the first budget.
They will collect, yes, they will collect based on an amount that they determine, whether it's our first budget or an amount that they decide we're just going to start collecting. And then somewhere, once a budget is passed, there's a reconciliation, which can be very costly, especially if they've overpaid us. Let's say they're remitting based on something higher than what you end up with, right? You have to pay those funds back. It's very costly. Now, what's nice about this 2026 budget is it's very conservative. The growth is very small. Last year was particularly difficult, budgeting for this current year, because student numbers across the state skyrocketed based on the weighting calculation changed. And our student numbers skyrocketed, which allows us to draw more of those state funds. But it was very confusing and it was a very difficult time with the rhetoric and the dialogue statewide. But, yep, no, go ahead.
So what we're voting on March 4th is how much we're spending, not how much we're going to be taxed.
Correct. Correct.
I don't think that's clear to the voters.
It's, Right. So it's become, we have tried to separate the tax calculation, but it has become such an expectation, and it's not just our district, it's statewide. Budget manners talk about this all fall. That's what we talk about all fall long. It's become such a part of the information that we want to know as voters that we have to kind of give it to you. But yes, you're voting on the actual spending, the budget itself, not on the tax rate.
We don't understand that.
Right. And the warning, the article that you read, it's all about the spending per pupil, has nothing to do with what this is going to cost, tax-wise, right? You know, and in years when we've got tax rates going down, yeah, hey. In years when you've got tax rates going up, it's difficult. And it's particularly difficult to understand why those tax rates are going up if you're putting forward a really conservative budget. This year, the stars have aligned. It's a conservative budget, and tax rates are going down. There's no indication that that yield is going to drop yet, but there's no indication that it's going to. And I don't think in the 10 years I've been here, or 9.5 years, it's actually gone down by June 30th. Or not significantly.
This is not a typical year.
It's only gone up.
Seriously, I mean, you're gonna have federal cuts.
Well, we don't know that yet.
Yeah, we don't-
And the budgets are the budgets. Yeah. And they're not, so far, that rhetoric is not impacting the 26 budgets. And that's statewide. I mean, I kind of feel like I'm speaking for my fellow business managers and other districts, but that's what we're hearing. So, any other questions? Thank you, and please vote on March 4th. And as always, you can ask me any question, dclark@lnsd.org. Shoot me an email.
And we will add this slide deck to our FY26 budget information webpage on our websites. You can get to that from any of our school websites. The page itself lives on our district website, so that's at lnsd.org. So those will be up tomorrow morning for everyone's viewing pleasure, as well as this recording.
Thank you.